Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are crouching in the middle of a forest older than time, ankle deep in ferns, listening to absolutely nothing. And that's the problem. Nothing is too quiet. Not even the wind dares to rattle the branches, and every step you take squelches louder than it should. There's something wrong with the air. Your breath feels too loud. Even your thoughts feel like they echo. Somewhere out here, something hears everything, even what's in your lungs. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And I want to know, where are you watching from and what time is it where you are? Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along a ridgeline slick with rain. Beneath your bare feet, the mud remembers more than it should. Massive footprints curve ahead through the undergrowth, each one the size of a dinner table, pressed so deep they still hold water. Something came through here. Something that didn't speak. You already noticed something strange. This forest isn't quiet in the way a quiet room is quiet. It's held back. Every leaf seems to anticipate something. No bird's song, no insects, just a kind of suction in the atmosphere, like the forest is bracing itself. And that's when you see it, your first glimpse of the creature. It's a dinosaur, yes, but not one of those flashy, growling movie monsters. No stomping, no screeching. This one's tall, thin, and moves with a kind of grace that makes you want to hold your breath. Its long tail barely brushes the wet ferns behind it, its eyes don't blink, and its mouth shut tight, completely still, but its nostrils flare rhythmically, releasing a thread of vapor into the air. You watch it stop and exhale. The sound is barely audible, not a snort, not even a sigh, more like a pulse, a breath that doesn't end in sound but in intention. And you feel it somewhere low in your chest, a vibration that doesn't belong to you. This is a whisper breather. They don't announce themselves. They don't roar. They breathe in language. It's how they warn each other, how they hide, and how they stay alive. Historians still debate whether this behavior evolved solely as a survival mechanism or whether it became cultural, even communicative, like music with no melody. But out here under these shadowed trees, you know one thing for sure: the loud ones are all gone. Some of them, like the early ceratosaurs and tyrannosaurids, used to bellow like thunder. Deep, resonant chest sounds that echoed across plains. Power, right? But it turns out thunder might be impressive in open deserts. Not so much in a wet jungle crawling with ambush predators that learn to listen before they learn to strike. And the jungle adapted too. Think about it. Plants that evolve to shiver at the faintest vibration, insects that flee the moment a breath shifts the humidity. A whole ecosystem weaponized against sound. You move closer, just barely. The whisper breather is joined by a second. This one's smaller, maybe younger. Its nasal passages flex, and the air between them ripples, not in sound, but in movement. You can see the breath being exchanged. Fun fact: there's a desert lizard today that communicates using tiny body pulses through sand. No noise at all. Makes you wonder what else we're not hearing. Anyway, this dinosaur pair. They move together now, walking in a zigzag pattern. Not random, deliberate. One exhales through the left nostril. The other responds with a double puff from both. You're watching an ancient language, one that probably never touched a vocal cord. The rain begins to fall heavier now, muffling your own breath. A relief. Your footsteps don't sound like betrayal anymore. You let yourself relax, just a bit. Then the trees shift. Not much. Just a single subtle tilt in the branches. You're not alone anymore. From the far edge of the clearing, something huge steps into view. It's the opposite of the whisper breather. Heavy-footed, broad-skulled. Its jaw hangs slightly open, drool dragging a line through the leaves. And you know, this one doesn't whisper. It waits. The whisper breathers go still. No run, no roar, just absolute eerie stillness. Their breathing stops. The predator, let's call it a blunt-snouted carnosaur, shuffles a step forward. It tilts its head. Its hearing isn't great. It depends on motion. And one drop of water lands on your shoulder. You flinch. It's enough. The predator wheels toward you, and both whisper breathers explode into motion. No noise, just power and speed. Their long necks weaving through branches like brushstrokes. The silence shatters only in your ears because you're crashing through the undergrowth, heart pounding. Somehow you escape. You fall into a hollow between roots, gasping mud in your mouth. And as the sounds fade, you realize the whisper breathers didn't just flee. They warned each other. You were listening to a message not meant for you, and now that you've heard it, the air won't let you forget it. That's the thing with some ancient knowledge. It doesn't need words to be remembered. You're still breathing too loud. You know it. The moss beneath your chest doesn't muffle much, and every exhale fogs the leaves in front of your face. You try to copy what you saw, that gentle, controlled release from the nostrils. But your lungs don't know the dance. You're a clumsy mimic in a forest that grades performance by survival. The whisper breathers are gone, at least from sight, but their trail remains. Not in footprints, they barely leave those, but in patches of disturbed fern, where their tails swept silently in faint patches of condensation, on low branches in the rhythm of vapor rising, where nothing else dares to exhale. You follow. And somewhere along that trail you realize this behavior isn't a quirk, it's a design. Long ago, millions of years before mammals began hooting and huffing, some dinosaurs developed something strange inside their heads. An anatomical trait that didn't look like much at first. Small internal bone structures inside their nasal cavities. Coiled, chambered, twisted into spirals. It's called a nasal turbinate system. Sounds fancy. Basically bone tunnels. But what it does is remarkable. You stumble upon a rock fall, fossils embedded in the cliffside. One skull catches your eye. Broad snout, narrow eyes, and there it is, those spiraling ridges inside the nose. Not visible at first glance, but once you know what to look for, it's obvious. This dinosaur didn't just breathe, it shaped its breath. Through those chambers, air could be filtered, humidified, and modulated, like tuning a flute with your face. Historians still debate whether these adaptations started as temperature regulation or were always intended for communication. But the effect is clear. These were the first lungs that spoke without sound. And you begin to see the forest differently. Every branch is an antenna. Every breeze a signal carrier. The dinosaurs who evolved nasal breathcraft didn't need to shout. They became composers of mist, manipulating invisible pulses of exhalation. To be loud was to die. To be subtle was to survive. You step into a clearing now and it hits you. Really hits you. How much of our modern sound obsession is built on wrong instincts? Humans yell. We yell to warn, to attract, to entertain. We yell to feel real, but in this ancient place, the quiet ones are the dominant ones. Not weak, not scared, in control. Across the glade, you see another whisper breather. This one is larger, older, maybe even ancient. Its hide is faded patterns lost to years of camouflage, and something about it feels ceremonial. It doesn't move much, just sits beneath a canopy, breathing in slow intervals. Its nostrils pulse with intention. Then you see the young ones. 4 of them nestled nearby, smaller and scrappier, but trying to copy the same breath rhythm. Not all get it right. One keeps flaring both nostrils at once, way too eager. Another exhales too fast and rustles the leaves. Rookie mistake. But the old one doesn't correct them with sound. It just shifts slightly, adjusts its posture. The message is clear. Try again. You crouch in the brush and watch the lesson unfold. The juveniles begin to sync their breathing with the elder. Inhale, pause, exhale. Thinner this time, narrower, like the air itself is being drawn through the eye of a needle. It's a ritual, not just survival. This is how knowledge passes. Fun fact, There's a species of gibbon alive today that can produce different songs depending on whether it's sunrise or not. That's right. They have a morning song and an oops, it's still dark song. No predators involved, just internalized rhythms. Makes you wonder if this what you're watching isn't just tactical but ancestral. A way of remembering. The elder dinosaur lets out a long, low nasal tone so low you feel it more than hear it. The juveniles freeze perfectly still. Something passed between them. A signal. Then, as if summoned by that breath alone, the entire group rises and begins to walk. No sound, just movement, as if the breath itself decided the timing. They vanish deeper into the woods, and you stand there half wishing your nose was longer, more folded maybe with a few extra chambers for signal work. Instead, you have a stubby mammal snout barely enough to pick up a cold, let alone a coated exhale. You continue on. Here's the weird part: as you walk, you start breathing differently. You don't mean to, but the forest teaches you. Inhale slower, hold. Let it out like you're hiding a secret in the mist. It feels calmer, safer, like you've tuned your lungs to the frequency of the trees. And that's when you hear it, not far. A low hiss, not threatening, not loud. A greeting maybe. It comes in two pulses. Pause. Then one short puff. You freeze. Is that for you? From behind a fern wall, something shifts. Another whisper breather, smaller, curious. It tilts its head and mimics your last breath. Oh no, you're in a conversation now. You try something. Inhale through your nose, exhale gently. A 2-count pulse. The creature flicks its tail. A reply. Then it edges closer enough that you can see its nostrils twitch. There's recognition in the movement. You've spoken its language, badly, but sincerely. And for a brief second, you're not just an observer anymore. You're part of a dialogue older than fire. One built on bones that hummed instead of growled, on lungs that whispered instead of roared. The moment ends, of course. It always does. The creature backs away, merges with the shadows. You're alone again, but your chest remembers the rhythm, and your breath no longer echoes. It belongs. You wake up cold. Not because of the temperature, but because the forest is colder now. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin. It's the kind that settles behind your eyes, that makes you listen harder, like your body knows before your mind does something has changed. There's no whisper breathing this morning, no gentle exhale songs, no soft pulses. Just the hush of trees and the drip of water and the realization that something enormous used to live here and now doesn't. You walk along the edge of a dried stream bed, noticing the way vines hang like forgotten ropes abandoned mid-use. Something once passed through here that needed silence more than sleep, and now it's gone. Extinct, migrated, hiding. In deeper silence, historians still debate whether this species of thunder-voiced predators disappeared because they couldn't adapt their lungs or because their lungs made too much noise. You find a rib, just one. The length of a canoe curled like a question mark in the mud. And around it, no footprints, no scavenging. Even the insects seem to be avoiding the area. The rib belonged to something loud. You know that before you even spot the rest of the skeleton partially buried under earth that refuses to reclaim it fully. It's a carnosaur, but not like the one from before. This one had modifications expanded. Sinus chambers, hollow cranial crests, powerful voice box ridges in the throat. The kind of dinosaur that didn't just speak, it announced. The kind of animal you'd hear before you ever saw it. The kind that made young forests fall quiet for miles. And now, it's just bones and silence. You lean against the rib cage, its arches casting striped shadows on your face. This thing probably had lungs like bellows, designed not just for breathing, but for terrifying. That was the problem. The forest changed faster than it could. Predators that relied on intimidation lost their edge when prey became better listeners. And the prey, oddly enough, began to thrive not just by hiding but by out-communicating the loudmouths. The whisper breathers weren't just shy dinosaurs. They were strategists. And the loud ones, well, they kept announcing themselves in a world that had stopped applauding. You sit back and think about modern parallels. We still do this. We make noise to prove presence. Honking cars, alarm clocks, fireworks for fun, but maybe in the deeper blueprint of survival, the real power lies in restraint. You walk farther. The air grows heavier. Not humid, just thick with anticipation. Then up ahead, a fossilized footprint perfectly preserved in mineral-rich clay. Huge, three-toed, deep. You place your foot inside it. It swallows you whole. It belonged to one of the last thunder-mouthed predators, and right beside it, barely visible, a smaller print. Different shape, narrower, toes longer. The signature of a whisper breather. They crossed paths. And here's where the story really twists. You kneel beside the smaller track. The positioning suggests a pause. The toes splayed, almost like the whisper breather waited. And the deeper impression at the heel that wasn't from walking, that was from holding still, bracing. Maybe it wasn't running away. Maybe it was watching the loud one. A standoff. A moment of silence so loud it left an imprint. Fun fact, octopuses can mimic not just shape and color, but texture. You'd think that was enough? But some also manipulate ripples, silent ones in water, to send warnings. Ripples. Not tentacles, not suction, water breath messages. Soundless communication exists all around us. We just don't always notice it. Back to the clearing. You follow the trail where both creatures likely passed through, and suddenly there's no more loud footprints, just a few drag marks, a collapsed palm, a spray of fossilized blood spatters preserved in resin. The loud one fell here. No bite marks, no broken bones, just collapse. And across from it, scrawled in scratch marks on a nearby log, a whisper breather's claw tracing maybe 5 parallel gouges. Not random. A sign, a count. Historians still argue whether whisper breathers had writing. Probably not in the way we do, but symbolic memory. Maybe something passed along not just in breath but in gesture. You exhale and feel your breath vibrate faintly through your nose. It hits the branch in front of you, condenses, and vanishes. You're starting to do it unconsciously now. Maybe that's how it started. Maybe whisper breathing wasn't learned but remembered. As if lungs were born with the memory of caution. A low rumble begins behind the hills. Not an animal. Thunder. Real thunder this time. And you think of the name we gave those dinosaurs, thunder lizards. Maybe it was always ironic. Because the ones who lasted didn't roar. They whispered. And as you move toward shelter, the first drops of rain begin to fall through the canopy in soft applause. The rain doesn't fall like modern rain, it breathes. Each droplet lands like a question, each splash an unfinished thought. You step into the shelter of a fallen tree trunk, its bark worn smooth by time and traffic. Something has nested here before. Big enough to carve the wood, quiet enough to not get caught. And in the center of the hollow log, barely touched by rot, lies the crown jewel of this journey so far, a skull. Not a whole one, but enough. The snout is intact, and more importantly, the nasal cavity is beautifully preserved. You brush the dirt away gently. You can't help it. This feels like touching language, the kind that never needed an alphabet. This skull belonged to a Parasaurolophus, most likely. One of the hadrosaurs, duck-billed, long-tailed, awkward from the outside. But inside, a cathedral of sound. That long, curved crest atop its head wasn't just decorative, it was a biological resonator. Bone tunnels spiraled through it like an organ pipe. Air would move from lungs through nostrils, up through the crest, and echo in modulated pulses before returning to the world as sound, except not always audible sound. Historians still debate the intended frequency of these exhalations. Some were likely subsonic, others possibly too soft for predators to decode. It wasn't just about making noise, it was about shaping breath into signals, Whisper breathing on an architectural scale. You lift your head, and now the forest looks like a soundboard. The angle of the trees, the shape of the canopy, these aren't random. You imagine herds walking through here crest to crest, exhaling signals into the air like radio towers cloaked in leaves. And for the first time, you understand something strange. These dinosaurs didn't roar because they didn't need to. They built their messages. Fun fact, there's a species of whale that can echolocate without making a click. It sends out tiny pulses from deep in the skull, reverberated through fatty bone channels. Quiet sonar, and yet it can hunt squid at night in pitch-black water. You think back to the Parasaurolophus skull beneath your fingers. Same idea, different time, different medium. Suddenly, a gust of wind swirls through the clearing, and the nostril holes on the fossil hum. Just a little, just enough, you freeze. It's like the skull is still trying to talk. Not a sound you can decipher, but a tone. A breath trapped in a fossil memory. You sit beside it and close your eyes, and then you feel, not hear it, feel it, an ancient signal looping back through time, reshaped by wind and decay. Not a word, not a sentence, more like a hum of warning, or maybe a lullaby. Hard to tell, really. It reminds you that not all communication was about alarm or direction. Some of it was emotional, calming, herd bonding. You imagine a moonlit clearing like this millions of years ago, a dozen Parasaurolophus lying in a half circle, heads tilted crests, catching starlight, breathing in pulses. The forest quiet. Their young nestled between tails and limbs. No predator nearby dares approach, not because of brute force, but because the herd's breath fills the space. A presence, an acoustic boundary. The jungle in that moment becomes language. And you, lying in a hollow log, begin to hear it again. Two soft pulses in the distance, almost playful, followed by one long, low exhale. Somewhere out there, someone is speaking. You move toward the sound slower this time. You're not just eavesdropping now, you're translating. Another skull still half buried in a hill. Smaller crest, maybe a juvenile. You put your face close. Exhale gently through your nose. The wind catches the edge and echoes faintly back. It responds. No joke, a faint ping of returning air pressure. The way a bottleneck hums when blown just right. Not language, but not nothing. You laugh softly. Nice to meet you too, you whisper. The laugh echoes weirdly. The skull hums again. You swear it sounds annoyed. This is how communication breaks down mammals trying to be clever. You press on deeper into the undergrowth where the mist hangs thicker and the trees seem to lean closer. A narrow ridge curves into view, and on the far side you spot another group of whisper breathers. Different species this time, bulkier, more upright, but the breath patterns are unmistakable, side-facing nostrils, slow pulses from expanded chest cavities, tiny reverberations in the ribs. One of them stands perfectly still as the others exhale toward it in sync. And just like that, you witness something ancient and unnerving. A breath vote. Each member of the group releases a breath in sequence, short, long. Then the still one responds with a triple exhale. The group turns. Decision made. Historians still debate whether this behavior was instinctual or ritualistic, but it looks suspiciously like consensus. A prehistoric parliament made of lungs. You stay crouched hidden. You don't want to interrupt. You've already learned what happens when loud things show up uninvited. The wind shifts again. The Parasaurolophus skull back in the clearing hums faintly behind you. Or maybe it's just memory. Either way, you inhale softly through your nose, let it out through just one side, and listen. For the first time, your breath doesn't feel like yours alone. It's a borrowed voice. A whisper that didn't start with you and won't end with you either. The whisper breathers don't sleep like you do. You think of sleep as a full stop. A shut door, a flicked switch, a moment where you surrender entirely. But here, sleep comes in loops, in shifts, and always with one eye half open, because the jungle doesn't offer true rest. Only intervals. You're camped beneath a gnarled tree with roots that seem to avoid noise, as if even the plants have learned to grow around sound. Overhead, the canopy pulses gently with breath, not wind breath. From above, a herd of whisper breathers slumbers in phases. They are lying in a ring, not touching, never touching, but close enough that one breath can find the next. You watch them 20, maybe 30 individuals. Tall-bodied, long-legged crests flickering in the dark like sails twitching to invisible gusts. And here's the strange part, they're breathing in sequence. Not all at once, not randomly. A wave, the first one. Bigger, older, inhales deeply and releases a long nasal whisper. That signal passes to the next. And the next? Around the circle. It takes 12 breaths to complete a loop. Then silence. Then the cycle starts again. You realize this isn't just breathing. This is watch duty. Historians still debate the full function of this pattern, whether it's a signal of safety, a heartbeat for the herd, or a sentry code passed like a torch. But one thing is certain, they're awake and asleep at the same time. A collective mind with lungs for clocks. You test it. Inhale with the wave. Exhale just a moment too early. 3 heads lift. 3. No movement, no panic, just alertness. And then, as if to say, nice try mammal, they lower again. The wave continues. You feel sheepish. You'd offer an apology, but you're starting to suspect these creatures don't believe in sorry. Only adjustment. A light rain begins. Not enough to soak you. Just enough to blur the breath patterns rising from the herd. Mist coils like a slow-motion aurora above their bodies. You realize it forms shapes, not deliberate but suggestive. Spirals, arcs, flickering loops. It looks like a pulse made visible, like sound wrapped in fog. You glance at the juveniles in the group. Smaller, more restless. Their breathing isn't quite in sync. One keeps rushing his exhale, huffing out short bursts like someone trying to whistle before learning how. Another's crest vibrates too fast like a broken radio antenna. But no adult corrects them. Instead, one of the older ones, massive stoic, with a snout that looks older than the hill it rests on, lets out a low-delayed exhale, slower than the wave. Off rhythm, deliberately. And like dominoes falling in reverse, the herd adjusts. The juveniles follow first. Then the adults resynchronize. The whole wave shifts. Slower now, calmer. You realize the elder didn't scold the young. It matched them, then pulled them back to balance. That's not biology, that's teaching. Fun fact, there's a species of African wild dog that starts its hunts with a sneeze vote. If enough dogs sneeze, they go. If not, they wait. It's not a myth. It's biology behaving like politics. So if dogs can vote by sneeze, maybe dinosaurs could monitor the jungle by breath. You watch the pattern again. One breath moves. The next picks it up. One pair exhales simultaneously, the handover point. The rhythm never breaks. But here's where it gets odd. Something out there doesn't like it. A low growl trembles through the underbrush, not a whisper breather, that's for sure. It's the throat rattle of a sound hunter, a carnivore that needs noise to locate prey. Probably evolved to hear distress calls, stampedes, chaos. This herd gives it none of that. They don't bolt. They don't roar. They just shift in silence. The breathing loop tightens. The sequence compresses. Still no noise, but the pulses are shorter now. Closer. The herd becomes a single muscle. One breath system, one reaction. The growl grows nearer. You don't see the predator yet, but the plants do. Ferns tremble, saplings twist. Then, without warning, the elder releases a double pulse exhale. High pressure, sharp. Not loud, but you feel it hit the ground. The air vibrates. Every whisper breather bolts in one direction except two. They stay. Juveniles. And you understand the pattern now. Sleeping in shifts. These two were never meant to sleep. They were watchers in training. But they're not ready. Their breath is panicked. Out of sync. They freeze. The elder circles back. No roar, no stomp. Just one breath pulled deep from its chest, expelled in a spiral through the crest. The predator falters, confused. Maybe startled by the sudden shift in air pressure, maybe just caught off guard by how still everything gets. Then the elder turns and walks, and the juveniles follow. No noise. The jungle resets. You lean back against a tree and try not to laugh too loud. You wouldn't want to ruin their choreography. The herd reassembles farther down the ridge, already falling into a new rhythm. You hear one of the juveniles let out a breath that sounds almost smug. The elder ignores it, probably for the best. You exhale. Too fast, a little noisy, and behind you a fern rustles. Oops. The hatchling is watching you. Not with fear, not with trust either. Just curiosity, like you're a weird noise in a quiet room. A misplaced footstep. A breeze that doesn't belong. It blinks once, very slowly, then exhales through one nostril. A little whistle escapes accidental. Juvenile lungs haven't learned restraint. You're crouched behind a curtain of moss, trying to stay invisible. The hatchling doesn't buy it. It takes a step forward. You blink, it blinks back, and then in one astonishing moment it lies to you. You didn't expect lies from dinosaurs. But this little whisper breather draws a breath, lets out a triple pulse nasal flutter so soft it barely ruffles the moss. To you it sounds like hesitation, innocence. Then it scampers in one direction and stops. Hunkers down, stares. The message is clear, I went that way. Problem is, it didn't. From the other side of the log, another hatchling peeks out. This one clearly fooled. It follows the false trail without question. You watch as the deceived sibling chirps another exhale, maybe a check-in, and then disappears into the brush. The liar waits, then eats all the berries. This dinosaur just bluffed using breath. Prehistoric misdirection. Historians still debate whether this sort of breath deception was common or rare. Was it unique to opportunistic juveniles or a broader evolutionary trick? You'd ask the experts. But the liar hatchling already looks ready to try it on you next. You stay very still. It's not just sneaky, it's subtle. The puff it used was too soft for a predator to hear. No rustle, no scent cue, just air shaped like a suggestion. This is what evolution does with time. It teaches children to whisper lies before they can run. Fun fact, ravens will fake hiding spots for food if they know they're being watched. It's one of the earliest signs of cognitive trickery in birds. The idea that someone else can hold a wrong belief and you can encourage it. This little dinosaur just did that with breath. The hatchling flicks its tail and trots toward a cluster of stones. You follow at a distance. It exhales again, this time with rhythm. 2 slow puffs, 1 sharp one. It's signaling. But to whom? Then a rustle. Another juvenile appears slightly larger, more confident. The first hatchling lets out a low exhale, too low to be heard unless you're close. The new arrival responds in kind. And then something odd happens. The smaller hatchling crouches, drops its shoulders, and pretends to look hurt. The larger one rushes forward, concerned, eager. You know where this is going. In a flash, the smaller one spins around, grabs a fruit pod, and bolts, laughing in breath, if that's even possible. The larger hatchling snorts through both nostrils in irritation, then reluctantly gives chase. It's not a fight, it's a lesson. Deception through air, not just avoidance. Not just communication, but play. The idea that language, any form of it, could be used for fun is one of those dividing lines in evolution. You don't get play until you have room to be inefficient. And you don't get trickery until you have an audience. You crouch down again, quieter this time, and watch them cycle through it all over again. This time it's a fake danger signal. A rushed double breath meant to trigger a flee instinct. One hatchling sprints off. The other casually sits down and eats more. It's adorable and a little terrifying, because these aren't just kids being kids. This is training. At some point in their lives, they will need to lie to something with teeth. And unlike mammals who scream or freeze, these ones will breathe a believable lie. The shadows lengthen. The elder returns. You hear its breath first. Not loud, but authoritative. A slow, downward curving exhale through its crest. The sound is low enough to vibrate the tree bark. Both hatchlings freeze, then return chastised but not punished. The elder stands still, lets out one more breath. A kind of lesson complete tone. Then it turns and disappears back into the mist. The hatchlings sit beside each other now, mirroring each other's breath. No more lies, at least for the moment. You move closer to the moss curtain again and whisper, because honestly, it just feels wrong to speak here, clever girl. Yeah, you quoted the movie? You couldn't help it. The smaller hatchling hears you tilt its head and lets out a breath that almost sounds like a snicker. You might be the punchline of its next prank. And that's fine, it earned it. Because today you saw one of the oldest tricks in the book, not written, not spoken, but breathed into being. And for a moment, the forest feels less like a wilderness and more like a school. A quiet one, where lying is an art form. And the first language you ever spoken wasn't really spoken at all. You're walking now, not sneaking, not hiding, just moving through the forest like you belong, because after a while, when you've learned to quiet your breath, soften your steps, and stop thinking of speech as sound, the jungle starts to accept you. A low mist hangs in the air. Not thick, but purposeful. It moves in the same rhythm the dinosaurs do. And up ahead, past a ring of trees shaped like old rib cages, you see them, a migrating herd. Dozens, no hundreds of whisper breathers. They aren't sprinting or galloping. There's no stampede. This is a float across land. A movement so steady and soft it looks choreographed by weather. And the most remarkable part? They're steering themselves with their noses. Every few steps, one exhales in a distinct pattern. A quick burst, then a pause. The one beside it exhales differently, slower, more horizontal. It's a conversation, but instead of deciding where to go, they're adjusting position, checking direction, and reminding each other of things that no map could hold. You trail behind, half invisible in the mist. The air here is full, not with noise, but with information. Historians still debate whether certain dinosaurs could migrate by celestial alignment or temperature gradients. But this, what you're seeing, it's nasal navigation. Migration steered by breath memory. It's not wild once you think about it. Some birds today follow magnetic fields stored in their beaks. Some whales use infrasonic bellows passed between generations as oceanic roadmaps. These whisper breathers, they seem to inhale the path itself. The herd stops. Briefly, you can't see why. Then you hear it, a low double pulse. The signal echoes forward, passed from nostril to nostril. The entire front flank begins to pivot east. No one shouts, no one leads. The air leads. At the center of the herd is an ancient one, gray-hide, sun-faded crest, one eye partially closed from an old wound. You recognize the breathing rhythm before you even see her. It's the same elder from before. She lets out a soft, deliberate exhale. Not even the ones nearest to her seem to notice. But 2 full rows ahead, a young adult adjusts its direction by just 2 degrees. You've just seen something you don't quite believe, a message carried without volume or error across nearly 60 individuals. No megaphone, no alpha roar, just nostrils tuned to memory. The herd moves on. You fall into step beside a juvenile about the size of a cow with a lopsided crest. It glances at you but doesn't seem threatened. Instead, it lets out a gentle, upward breath, questioning. You reply with your best attempt, 1 soft exhale, 2 short pulses. It's nonsense. Utter breath gibberish. The juvenile squints like you just called its mother a fern. Fair enough, but it walks beside you anyway, humming faintly through its nose as if trying to teach you on the move. You're learning now that their breath isn't just communication, it's direction, it's memory, it's a wind-borne map. You see it in the way they choose paths between trees, never brushing against leaves, always stepping where moss dampens their steps. Even their migration songs, yes, that's what you're calling them now, change slightly with altitude, not notes, not melody, just rhythm in air. Fun fact, some elephants can detect distant thunder miles away by picking up vibrations in their feet. It's how they know when rains are coming, long before clouds form. It's not hearing, it's feeling. These dinosaurs, they've taken it one step further. They breathe each other's feelings into a travel guide. You reach a ridge and the herd pauses. The land beyond is vast, golden open. Less jungle, more scrub, less echo, more vulnerability. The elder approaches the edge. She breathes, one long pulse. The herd responds not by moving but by silencing entirely. Not a single breath is audible. For a full minute, the entire landscape holds its lungs. Then, without warning, they move down the ridge. Not in chaos, not afraid, just faster, efficient, alert. You glance down. At the base of the slope, a predator slinks away confused. It had been waiting for sound, a misstep, a branch crack, but this herd gave it nothing, just the exhaled equivalent of a shrug. The wind picks up behind you. It catches one of the juvenile's crests and pulls a soft musical hum from it. Unintentional, but beautiful. The elder turns, briefly breathes a low correction, and the juvenile tucks its head. The hum ends, but it lingers in your ears. Because this wasn't just a migration, it was a procession, a language on the move. And for a moment you walked inside it. You start to understand that some ancient knowledge isn't buried in fossils or stored in amber. It's inhaled, in the rhythms between creatures, in the pauses between steps, in the breath that points the way when everything else is lost. The herd fades into the scrub. You stand alone now, but not disconnected. Your lungs remember what your ears never heard. You've been walking for hours, though the forest doesn't mark time the same way you do. Shadows stretch and twist as if on their own schedule, and you've long since given up guessing direction by sun or scent. But the herd you're following doesn't guess. They migrate by murmur. You crest a shallow rise and see them again 30, maybe more, moving in a long arc across the valley below. They aren't rushing, there's no urgency. Just that same steady wave of exhaled rhythm flowing from one end of the line to the other. What's strange, what's beautiful is how they don't look lost, not even a little. The path they take doesn't follow rivers or ridges. It weaves through terrain in ways that make no human sense, but to them it's a map written in vapor. You descend the slope, quietly stepping between ancient roots and listening for that signature pulse. There it is. 3 soft nasal exhales followed by one elongated breath, then silence. Then the pattern repeats. You realize what you're hearing. Breadcrumbs. Each breath, each pulse of air is a marker, laid down like vaporous graffiti on trunks and stones, waiting to be interpreted by the next passing herd. It's not permanent air forgets quickly, but it lasts long enough for migration to become a tradition of breath. Historians still debate how these breath paths worked. Were they directional cues? Emotional signals? A combination of both. Some suggest they may have even included warnings. Don't go this way. Bad flood last season. Others think they were more ceremonial, but the effect is real. These creatures don't just move, they follow memory. You catch up with the rear flank of the herd. A juvenile stumbles, exhales sharply. The breath is caught by an adult and mirrored softer. A comfort signal. You wouldn't have noticed it if you hadn't been watching the edges. Even their stumbles have etiquette. Fun fact, some elephants return to the exact same spots their ancestors died. Not because they remember the individual necessarily, but because the smell of ancient bones still hangs in the air. Scent as pilgrimage. Here, it's breath. You move closer. The leader of the herd is a massive, slope-shouldered elder with a snout like driftwood and eyes that blink slower than time. Its crest is cracked near the base, a fossil in motion. You can tell it's the Pathfinder not just because it's up front, but because it breathes before every terrain shift. It stops, takes in air, and then releases a long, low spiral through its nasal crest. The herd shifts slightly, angling left. No sound passed between them, just that breath. The tone, the pattern. The jungle obeys. You follow them across a shallow stream, the water warm and mineral-rich. The herd doesn't drink, not yet. Instead, they pause in formation, facing one another, and exhale in slow, overlapping spirals. This is ritual. You sit on a stone to watch, hiding in the steam. The breaths combine into a pattern so complex it almost feels like music. Not melody, not rhythm, but something older. A social tide. You don't know what it means, but neither do your thoughts. Because your lungs are trying to match it. You inhale slowly through your nose, try to match the frequency of one of the pulses, and for a few seconds you succeed. You feel the pattern. You belong to it. Then a twig breaks behind you. Not loud, but enough. The breath pattern falters. Two of the whisper breathers turn their heads toward your hiding spot. Not alarmed, not aggressive, just aware. Like they can feel your breath colliding with theirs. A hiccup in the code. You hold your breath. A long one. Your chest aches by the time they look away. The ceremony resumes. Short pulses, pauses, longer spirals. You realize they're syncing their breathing before drinking. Historians still debate the function of this ritual. Some believe it was about ensuring no movement gave away weakness. Drink together, live together. Others believe it had more to do with filtering emotional state through breath thirst as vulnerability. But in either case, it wasn't just about hydration. It was about trust. And when the herd finally lowers their heads, it's like watching a single creature sip from a mirror. You let yourself exhale finally, quietly. They don't look back this time. The journey resumes. You keep your distance but follow through a grove of hollow trees. The wind plays the trunks like flute's natural resonance. One of the juveniles stops to breathe into one just to see what happens. The sound that returns is distorted. A high, reedy squeal. The juvenile startles, then huffs in embarrassment. A sibling mimics the tone back poorly on purpose. It's a joke. They can't laugh the way you can, but they breathe funny at each other, which is close. The elder doesn't react. Pathfinding is serious work. You reach the top of another ridge. The trail curves downward into a valley flooded with morning mist. They pause. And then the elder does something strange. It exhales backward, not a sound but a rhythm pushed toward the herd behind it. A correction. And the pattern shifts again. You realize that wasn't just a direction call. It was a memory correction. A wrong breath signal left on the trail was about to mislead them, and the elder overrode it. Like editing a signpost, the air remembers, but the air can also be rewritten. For the first time, you understand these breath trails are not static. They're conversations with the land, passed down, revised, reinterpreted. Each herd leaves a version of the truth behind, and the next one decides whether to believe it. You sit in that valley for a long time after the herd disappears, breathing softly, adding nothing, just listening. The ferns ahead are motionless. That alone should tell you something is wrong. This forest usually breathes, leaves curl and unfurl, like lungs. Mist lifts like a sigh. Even the shadows shift with a kind of sleepy rhythm. But now, nothing moves. Not even the insects. The kind of stillness that makes your skin itch. You're not alone out here, and you realize you're not the only one following the breath trail. Something else is listening too. It's not a whisper breather. You can feel that immediately. This thing is heavier, angrier. It waits, not watches, and it listens the way predators do, with intent sharpened like teeth. A shape slides between the trees. Thick skull, narrow eyes. A carnivore built for ambush, not the thunder-mouthed kind you saw fossilized before. This one has evolved. It doesn't roar. It hunts breath. This is a silence predator. You duck, slow your inhale, and press against a trunk slick with moss. A few meters ahead, a whisper breather nest lies tucked in a shallow depression. A tangle of flattened reeds, scattered half-shells, and the faintest curls of exhalation still hanging in the air like invisible flags. And one small juvenile is sitting alone beside it. Too young, too distracted, still learning the rhythm. The predator knows it. You can see it calculating, waiting. The juvenile stands up and sneezes. Not loud, not ridiculous. Just a wet nasal spasm that echoes louder than a scream in this loaded silence. The forest doesn't move, but the predator does. 3 steps, 4, fast. You hear leaves torn away, breath sucked inward like a vacuum talons splitting bark. The juvenile freezes, and that's when it happens. From somewhere off to your left, a single perfectly timed exhale cuts through the air. Short, sharp, triangular. You didn't know air could sound shaped like geometry, but it does. The sound hits the predator like a wall, not because it's loud, but because it's meaningful. It stops, whips its head, a decoy, and another breath follows longer, dragging low through the mist like a curtain being drawn. The signal pulses through the trees. It's a breath ambush. The whisper breathers aren't running. They're manipulating the air. One adult steps out of shadow, shoulders, raised crest tilted slightly. No growl, no rush, just breath, precise, surgical. The predator falters again, uncertain. Another exhale, this one from behind. The predator turns confused. It's surrounded not by bodies, but by instructions. Every breath it hears is a suggestion of presence. I'm here. I'm over there. Maybe I'm closer than you think. This isn't fight or flight. It's theater. Fun fact. Some cuttlefish can pulse color patterns on their skin to mislead both mates and predators. The signals aren't just camouflage, they're deception. A language built in motion and light, these whisper breathers. They've mastered the same trick but with lungs. The predator makes its choice, lunges toward the direction of the sharpest breath. Nothing there, just a hollow tree curved like a trumpet, still resonating with the echo. From behind, two whisper breathers step into view. Not warriors, not fighters. Breathers with purpose. They move in slow, deliberate synchronization. Each step matched to an exhale. Their nostrils flare, catch the ambient air, and twist it like conductors turning fog into symphony. And together, they release a shared pulse. It's not just air, it's directional. Not heard, but felt. The predator stumbles, its sense of balance thrown off, its target gone, its ears useless. It retreats one step at a time, tail low, and then it's gone. No chase, just silence again. The whisper breathers don't celebrate. They don't move much at all, just a slow recalibration of the herd. One adult approaches the juvenile and lets out a breath, not a scolding, but something like reinstruction. The juvenile mimics it, better this time, slower, less wet. You stay where you are, trying not to sob your relief out loud. This forest doesn't forgive volume. You crawl out of the underbrush and walk in the predator's tracks, retracing the ambush. And you start to see it. This wasn't a reaction, it was a plan. At least 3 whisper breathers had stationed themselves at breath points, places where air moves predictably, like the hollow tree, the low stone dip, the fern wall that funneled wind. They used the terrain. They used breath physics, not just sound manipulation, but air control. Historians still debate the cognitive threshold needed to coordinate such a trap. Was it instinct group memory? Some suggest a form of proto-language, a kind of atmospheric choreography. Others think it may have been learned individually, passed from elder to hatchling like tools. You don't know, but you know this something in the way these creatures breathe has become something else, an interface with the world. They don't dominate their environment with power. They persuade it. They sculpt air. You stand in the predator's final footprint, feel the silence return. And you exhale slow, deliberate, steady. For once, your breath doesn't feel like a liability. It feels like participation. You find the body at dawn. The mist hasn't burned off yet, and the light spills through the trees like molasses, slow and gold, and a little too kind for what you're about to see. But it's there. Slumped in a clearing, half draped in vines, belly up like a capsized boat. A trumpet beast, one of the loud ones. You've only ever seen them from afar. Massive, noble, ridiculous creatures with crests so long they practically echo before they move. You used to think of them as tragic clowns making noise to be noticed in a world that had long since gone quiet. Now you realize they were something more complicated. This one didn't die in battle. There's no blood, no missing limbs, no predator in sight. The body is whole, intact, but collapsed, as if betrayed by its own effort. A massive thing brought down by volume. You circle the edge of the clearing. Every footstep squishes through wet ferns. Around the body, the soil is pitted with deep divots, evidence of thrashing. but the neck lies perfectly straight-crested skull tilted toward the sky mouth agape, and the air feels bruised, like it still remembers. This dinosaur didn't die running. It died calling. You imagine it now, perched on a ridged chest, heaving lungs, flooding the horned crest with a desperate, chest-wrung breath. Not a whisper, not a pattern. A roar. Too loud, too long, too alone. And someone or something heard. Historians still debate why these trumpet beasts kept their acoustic crests long after the age of predators that responded to volume. Some suggest it was for mating. Others claim it was a vestigial trait, but standing here, you begin to suspect something different. It was memory. This one wasn't trying to survive. It was trying to remember out loud. The breath call, the scream. It wasn't foolish. It was nostalgic, a last-ditch effort to summon a world that no longer responds. You kneel beside the body. The crest is still intact, arcing backward like a frozen wave. It's enormous, longer than your torso. You reach up and knock gently on the bone. It sings. Not loudly, but enough. The resonance is deep, hollow, and mournful, like a cello echoing inside a tunnel. You hold your breath and listen, and something strange happens. You feel drawn, as if the sound is unfinished, a note waiting for resolution. You lean in and place your ear to the base of the crest. A breeze passes through. The hollow tunnels of bone hum faintly. Not enough to hear, but enough to feel behind your eyes. It's like the dinosaur's final breath is still looping inside the skull. You close your eyes, and suddenly you hear it, the last call. A pulse of grief. A long, winding exhale twisted into something between a trumpet and a sob. The breath of someone who knew they were the last. Because that's what this was. Not just a death. A farewell performance. Fun fact, whales sometimes beach themselves while singing unusually long isolated songs. The cause is unknown, but some believe it may be a form of mourning or disorientation caused by the loss of community echo feedback. This trumpet beast. You think it died singing to ghosts. You sit in the ferns unsure what to do. There's no ritual here. No scavengers yet. Even the insects seem to give it space. And then faintly movement. From the edge of the clearing, a whisper breather steps forward. Then another, and another. A small group, crestless, silent, their nostrils twitching with soft intakes. They don't approach the body directly. They circle it, slowly, not with fear, but with caution. And then they begin to breathe, low, synchronized, like a drum beat you feel in your bones. Not a mourning song, not quite. More like an acknowledgement, a reply. You realize something. These whisper breathers don't hate sound. They just know when it's earned. They match the tempo of the final breath. 3 long pulses, a delay, then a soft echo. It's breathtaking. No feathers ruffled, no howls, just air shaped like memory. Historians argue whether dinosaurs mourned, whether they understood death. But the scene in front of you doesn't care about academic debate. It just breathes. You find yourself joining in. Not loudly, just a soft exhale. Directed upward like the crest is still listening. For a moment, all of you humans whisper as the air itself are tuned to the same breath. And the dead, they don't disappear. They resonate. The trail leads uphill now out of the trumpet beast's quiet grave and into higher, thinner air. The whisper breathers scatter gone as soon as they came, vanishing into vines like rumors. But the silence stays behind, trailing you like fog in your collar. You climb. At the summit, you find something you weren't expecting. Feathers. Tiny ones. Not scattered, not lost, arranged. They hang from a crooked branch like wind chimes, each one tied with a blade of split fern. Dozens of them swaying ever so slightly. You step closer and see the marks on the bark, scratches, small claw prints, faint patches of white dust. Something lives here. Or lived. And then you hear it. Not breath, not a whisper. A click. Fast, delicate, mechanical. You duck instinctively, crouch behind a fallen log, and scan the tree line. There, perched on a knotty root, one leg tucked under its downy belly, is a creature that looks like a mashup between a crow and a fossil. It's tiny, maybe the size of a shoebox with stiff tail feathers and big forward-facing eyes. Its nostrils are high up on its snout, and every few seconds it lets out a soundless breath, just a puff. It cocks its head, and then it clicks again. No breath involved this time, just beak and throat. This isn't a whisper breather. It's a listener, a feathered descendant maybe, or a parallel adaptation. But whatever it is, it has evolved something else entirely. Ears like instruments, it hops closer to the branch, extends its neck, and places its head inside the loop of hanging feathers, not to hide, to listen. And sure enough, the feathers move, not from wind, from air pressure. A soft breeze moves across the ridge and the feathers respond like dials. You watch as the creature shifts its posture slightly, eyes narrowing. It just read the echo of a whisper breather's breath minutes after it passed. Fun fact: owls can triangulate prey using asymmetrical ears and sound delay measured in millionths of a second. Their facial discs are shaped to direct sound exactly where it needs to go. This bird thing, it's doing that with nostril ghosts. Historians still debate the point at which dinosaurs gave rise to modern birds. Was it one lineage, many? But here, watching this little feathered relic monitor old breath like it's tuning a radio, you wonder if some of them didn't evolve from whisperers but from their audience. Because someone had to listen. You stay low, watch as more of them appear, 6, maybe 7 small feathered feather-collecting creatures, each one with exaggerated nasal passages and huge tympanic membranes bulging behind their eyes. They don't call to one another. They don't sing. They sink. One breathes out through its nostrils sharp and fast. Another responds not by breathing but by echoing the pattern in clicks. Breath converted to code. Exhale translated to percussion. This is post-language. You realize they aren't trying to communicate through the air, they're recording it. Reading what came before. Whisper breather migration patterns, echo trails, even emotional traces. The way a breath compresses when it's nervous, how it flutters when it's alert. This ridge is their archive. You move closer slowly and a few of the listeners scatter, but 2 remain. The bolder one hops toward you, leans in and lets out a quick double breath. You freeze. Is that a greeting? You try it back. 2 soft nasal exhales, no sound, just gesture. The bird freezes, tilts its head, then lets out a chirp audible this time. Sharp, but not aggressive, almost like a laugh. You've said the wrong thing, but it's amused. It flutters onto a higher branch and you notice what's tied around its leg, a long coiled feather, not decorative, weighted at the end. It hangs like a wind reader. This creature is a sensor, a walking, listening barometer for ancient breath. You sit beneath the branch, letting yourself finally rest, and you wonder if the whisper breathers built the original air language. Maybe these feathered descendants are the historians. Not the kind that write in books, the kind that remember through motion. As the sun rises higher, a few of the listeners take off, soaring low across the valley, riding breath currents like invisible roads. They flap only occasionally. Mostly they glide through memory. You stay there for hours, not because you have to, but because the idea that some creatures evolved not to speak but to listen more deeply feels like the most hopeful thing you've heard in days. Because maybe silence isn't the absence of meaning. Maybe it's the archive of it. And the feathers sway gently above you, still tracking a breath that's already gone. The ridge turns rocky as you descend. Cracked shale and ancient boulders litter the path, like forgotten punctuation in a long sentence of wind and time. You leave the listeners behind, their feather archive still swaying in the highland air, and drop into a small canyon, narrow and steep. You almost miss it, a partial skull wedged into the canyon wall. Fossilized, but barely. The rock around it still flakes when you touch it, soft as pressed ash. But the skull is extraordinary. It's shaped like no dinosaur you've seen. The snout is thin, but the bone around the nasal passage balloons outward in elegant looping ridges. Not horns, not armor, more like flutes. Curved, spiraled structures rise along the skull like wind instruments left behind by a prehistoric marching band. You kneel in front of it, mouth slightly open. Even now, with no lungs behind it, the thing sings. A breeze pushes through the canyon and catches the ridges. The fossil hums. High, reedy hollow. The sound bends in the narrow space between the rocks, bouncing off shale, like music trapped in an empty amphitheater. You're listening to a bone instrument designed by evolution. Historians still debate whether these flute-bone skulls belong to a specific species of hadrosaur or whether they evolved convergently in different lineages. Some believe they were used to resonate long-distance signals through fog. Others argue they were individual signatures unique to each creature, like a fingerprint in sound. But what's agreed on is this. These weren't for eating or fighting. These were for breathing music. You take off your pack and sit cross-legged in front of it. A gust hits. The fossil vibrates again. This time, the note drops an octave so low you feel it more in your ribcage than in your ears. You press your palm to the bone, still warm from the sun, still echoing. And suddenly you picture it alive, a beast taller than a giraffe neck. High fluted skull sweeping backward like a cathedral roof. It breathes in slowly through its chest and exhales through that magnificent nasal crown. The sound doesn't roar, it plays. A note so deep and complex it bends the grass as it passes. Not a voice, an identity. This dinosaur didn't whisper because it feared sound. It whispered because its sounds were sacred. Fun fact. There's a type of Mongolian flute that produces overtones from a single continuous breath, up to 6 layers of tones stacked together like a harmony made by one lung. You wouldn't be surprised if this dinosaur could do that too, and maybe more. You lie down on your back staring up at the fossil. From this angle, the nasal ridges resemble an ancient waveform frozen in stone. A carved lullaby. You try breathing out toward it, soft, deliberate, focused. It doesn't hum. But something shifts in the echo. The canyon replies almost. You roll to your side and trace the bone tunnels with your eyes. Some spiral deep into the skull like coiled springs. Others loop back on themselves. And you realize this isn't just a sound device. It's a filter. Every breath passed through decisions. Through chambers that decided tone, texture, and possibly meaning. Like choosing your words before you speak, except this creature did it through bone. The implications settle on you like dust. These dinosaurs didn't just make sound, they crafted language out of anatomy. Communication wasn't separate from the body, it was the body. And the canyon preserves it like a haunted wind chime. As you pack up, a final breeze slips through the fluted bone, releasing one last note. You don't know why, but it makes your spine tingle. A scale you didn't expect. A tone you can't name. Something between a sigh and a warning. It reminds you that this creature lived in a world where sound could save or doom entire herds. Where breath wasn't casual, it was currency. You take one last look at the skull, and you do something ridiculous. You hum back. Low, off-key, human. The wind catches your note, flattens it against the stone, and disperses it down the canyon. You laugh. You're not trying to talk to it. You're trying to thank it for building something so beautiful with nothing but lungs, silence, and bone. The air changes. Not in a dramatic end-of-the-world kind of way. It just feels off. Too light, maybe. Or too thin. You don't notice at first, not until your next breath feels like it slides through your nose without catching on anything. No weight, no resistance. And that's when you realize the whispers are wrong. You're in a valley now shallow and wide, hemmed by old volcanic ridges. It's open, too open, and the wind moves like it's confused, stumbling across the land instead of flowing over it. You pause beside a cluster of whisper breathers and immediately sense the tension. They're trying to communicate, but it's not working. One breathes a slow, spiraling exhale. It should arc left towards the others. It doesn't. It rises, disappears into the thinning air. The group stirs, uncertain. Their bodies shift, heads twitching, nostrils flaring in frustration. Another tries. A different pulse, short, sharp, nothing. It's like their breath is being erased mid-air. And now you notice the trees shorter, scragglier. Their leaves curl inward. The moss is pale. Everything feels dehydrated brittle. And the whisper breathers, they're struggling. Historians still debate what caused sudden behavioral collapses in certain dinosaur populations. Was it volcanic gas shifts, minor atmospheric fluctuations, or something even simpler like a temporary inversion of air density? Today you watch it unfold. This valley is a dead zone for breath signal transmission. You try it yourself. Exhale slowly through your nose, directing the air toward a hanging leaf. It doesn't move, not even slightly. The breath dissipates vertically like steam in a vacuum. One of the juveniles squeals, still silent but visibly upset. It runs to an elder and presses its snout to the adult's chest, seeking grounding. The adult tries to soothe with a low breath, but the exhale sputters. You can feel their panic beginning to simmer beneath the surface. They can't speak the way they've been built to speak. The air itself is unreliable. You think about radio interference, about what happens when a frequency gets jammed. This valley is like walking through static. The whisper breathers cluster closer now, abandoning long-range breath signals. They resort to short huffing pulses, direct contact gestures. Breaths you can feel on your skin. Nothing ambient, nothing elegant. It's communication, but it's desperate. One of them sneezes. It's the loudest sound you've heard all day. The herd freezes. That sneeze, accidental, uncontrolled, feels like a scream here. And worse, it works. The particles ride the awkward wind pattern and smacks against the nostrils of the group. They respond instantly, heads jerking up, breath pulses flaring erratically. The sneeze broke through. The old rules are failing. Another adult tries a different rhythm. 3 quick exhalations followed by a throat rattle. You've never seen a throat rattle before. It's not a roar. Its breath vibrated in the larynx, not just the nostrils. And the sound doesn't travel far, but it carries emotion, a low rumble of unease. Then it hits you. They're reverting, not just improvising, reverting, to a time before whisper breathing worked, to older instincts, louder ones. The transition isn't graceful. 2 of the herd's dominant individuals clash not violently but in posture. One uses broad shoulder movements, the other rears slightly. Both are trying to re-establish hierarchy without the breath-based rituals that usually keep things calm. This is what happens when the language breaks. You sit quietly beneath a tree, unsure whether to intervene, unsure how to help. Not that you could. You're a tourist in their failure. Fun fact: in some bat species, when environmental humidity shifts above a certain threshold, their echolocation clicks begin to misfire, producing echoes that return distorted. The bats adapt quickly, adjusting frequency. But in those first moments, chaos. You're watching that same chaos now. One of the juveniles begins to cry, not with sound, but with erratic breath, incoherent patterns, small gasps that don't line up with anything, like stuttering in vapor. A nearby adult presses close, trying to pulse a response, but even the calming exhale doesn't carry. It vanishes midair. The juvenile turns and runs, straight toward the open center of the valley. You run after it, your feet slipping in dry soil, heartbeat suddenly too loud. The juvenile trips, slides, and lays there, trembling its crest, fluttering in a wind that no longer tells the truth. You crouch beside it. For the first time, you don't try to speak. You breathe, not in their pattern, just steady, gentle, mammal-like. A long inhale through your nose, a pause, a soft exhale aimed not forward but down, so it curls up like a rising hand. The juvenile watches. You breathe again. It doesn't copy you, but it slows down. Your rhythm becomes its anchor. Not language, not tradition, just survival. Behind you, the herd is regrouping, tightening formation. They're moving out of the valley now toward higher ground. No more breath signals, no elegance, just huddled movement. You carry the juvenile partway until it's strong enough to walk. When you crest the ridge again, you feel it. Normal air. You breathe out and the mist moves. Not up, not away, but sideways, carried-shaped scene. You glance back at the valley. It still looks peaceful from a distance, but now you know the air there lies. and whisper breathers. They need truth in the wind. The jungle is darker now. Not from sunset, not yet, but from something heavier pressing down, the kind of tension that gathers before storms, or endings, or something so old it forgets what it was waiting for. You step carefully through the undergrowth. Your clothes smell like fossil dust and wet bark, and your breath instinctively matches the rhythm of the whisper breathers again. You're back in their world, back in sync. And that's when you stumble upon the remains of a battle. Not a modern one, not fresh, but recent enough that the story still clings to the trees. The moss is torn in spirals. Ferns bent, not crushed, trampled by creatures who moved with precision. There are streaks of dried scent on the trunks. Cloacal spray, chemical markers, panic territory strategy, but no blood. No obvious predator signs. This wasn't a hunt. It was a whisper war. Two groups. You could tell by the breath residue different signature patterns. One side used triple spirals. The other preferred pulsed bursts with a tail end drift. Not random. Not even accidental. Competing codes. You follow the trail. It leads into a tight clearing ringed by thin, sharp trees that sound like flutes when the wind squeezes through. There you see them. 3 whisper breathers lying still. Not dead breathing, slowly, but out of sync. One of them is bruised, its crest cracked at the base, leaking sap-like fluid. Another's ribs expand with effort. They're not physically destroyed. They're scrambled. Breath patterns scattered. Mismatched rhythms. They've been lied to. You kneel nearby and close your eyes. Listen. In the underbrush you hear it, 2 whispers. Faint. One high-pitched, one lower. Still active. Still fighting. You crawl forward until you see them, opposite sides of a stream. Heads low. Crests humming just above the ground. They breathe like chess players. One exhales a coded warning, short, long. The other replies with a calming tone, but masks a second pulse inside it, subtle, off-rhythm, a false peace offering. You watch the other freeze. It's the oldest trick in the whisper breather toolkit. And you realize not every breath is meant to help. Some are meant to manipulate. Historians still debate the cognitive complexity of these confrontations. Were these breath duels instinctual? Political? Did they involve hierarchy territory? What you're seeing now doesn't feel like accident or mere animal conflict. It feels like tactics. The lower-toned breather exhales again, this time deeper, aimed into the soil. The ground absorbs the vibration and carries it under the stream. It feels like backup, like reinforcements, but no one comes. It's a bluff. The higher-toned breather doesn't fall for it. It flares its nostrils and paces in a circle, shaping an echo with the nearby trees. It's setting a trap of reflected breath. The next inhale from its opponent will carry distorted signals, wrong information. This is not about claws or teeth. It's a breath duel. And then, as if on cue, the wind shifts. The spiral breath hits a tree wrong and echoes backward, confusing the lower-tone breather. It steps too far, left out of rhythm, and that's when the higher-tone one strikes. Not with force, but with breath. A rapid-fire exhale, short, long, blasted directly into the opponent's nasal chambers. A kind of prehistoric flashbang. The lower-tone breather collapses, not from pain, from signal collapse. It can't breathe correctly now its own pattern has been overwritten. You watch it shudder, trying to remember its rhythm. The victor doesn't finish the job. It exhales a retreat pattern and backs away. You sit in the brush, stunned, not by the drama, but by the elegance. This was a war fought in code, not for food, not even for mates, but for dominance of breath, a whisper war. Fun fact, in some songbird species, vocal mimicry is used to interrupt rivals, not to sing louder, but to confuse the rhythm of a competitor's mating song. It's not aggression, it's disruption. And here in this ancient forest, you just saw that same behavior in a form that predates language, music, and sound itself. One of the fallen breathers stirs. It's trying to restart its pattern, but the rhythm won't come. You crouch beside it and do what you've learned. You breathe. Once softly, a steady neutral pulse, no dominance, no trickery. The creature's crest flutters. It recognizes the gesture, not your pattern, but your intention. And slowly it tries again. A breath, then another. Slightly more in sync, like trying to remember a song you forgot mid-note. The others join, not to fix, to remind. Together, their breaths converge into a slow spiral, and the air starts to feel balanced again. You stay with them until night falls and the stars pulse overhead like a slower rhythm still. Somewhere nearby, another breath echoes in the dark. You don't know who it belongs to, but you know what it means. The war is over, for now. Night drapes the jungle like wet wool, soft, heavy, and unwilling to lift. You breathe through your nose as you've learned, but the air tonight is sticky. Not in temperature and silence. Even the whisper breathers have gone quiet. And that's how you know something new has arrived. You follow a trail of flattened reeds, fresh, still, springing back as you step. They lead to a grove, moonlight pooling on the damp leaves. And there, crouched low under the gnarled roots of an ancient tree, you see them. Not whisper breathers, mammals. Dozens of them, fur-matted and soft-eyed with snouts just slightly upturned. Small twitching feet, prehensile tails wrapped in leaves for warmth. They're not exactly mice, not exactly monkeys. Something in between, something early. But they're doing something very familiar. They're breathing in rhythm. Not the elegant spirals of the dinosaurs, not the nasal harmonies of crest singers or the sharp breath codes of combatants. But still, there's a pulse, a shared tempo. You watch as one leans forward and exhales toward another, short, rapid puffs. The second replies with a longer, slower breath that brushes the side of the other's face. A reassurance. They're not copying the dinosaurs. They're repurposing the technique. Not in the open, not at scale, but in the quiet. These mammals are stealing the silence. Historians still argue about the cognitive leap from breath to speech. But sitting here, it feels more like theft than innovation. You watch one of them imitate a breath signal pattern you recognize, a slow inhale, then 2 puffs. It's clumsy, almost comical, but it gets a reaction. The others freeze for a moment, then one mimics it back. You imagine the whisper breathers watching from the shadows, uncertain whether to be amused or disturbed. This isn't just mimicry, it's adaptation. Fun fact, modern rats can laugh. Not with their mouths too small, but with ultrasonic chirps. We didn't discover this until we made machines sensitive enough to hear it. They've been laughing under our noses for generations. So what if these ancient mammals, your ancestors, maybe weren't just surviving? What if they were listening? You crouch lower and see more signs. Nesting hollows marked with heat-scuffed bark. Small trails of moisture droplets that mark breath routes through leaves. They've built air lanes, just like the whisperers, but their version is simpler. Closer, clumsier. They don't shape the air with crests or bones. They shape it with nostrils and timing, and most importantly, trust. One of them, larger than the rest, steps forward. It has wide, wet eyes and ears like open bowls. It stares at you for a moment, doesn't flee. Instead, it sniffs, long, deliberate. Then it exhales toward you, barely more than a warm puff in the cool night. You don't respond right away. Then you match it. Gently, slowly. The mammal's ears twitch. It doesn't mimic you. It remembers. And then, unbelievably, it turns toward the others and relays your breath. You see it. The tempo, the shape, it mimics your pattern as if you've become a footnote in their emerging breath culture. A borrowed ritual. They're not inventing breath language. They're adopting it. Somewhere in the trees behind you, a whisper breather exhales, not sharply, not in alarm but in acknowledgement. They've noticed, too. The mammals are taking over the quiet. You begin to see it in other places now. Scratch marks in tree trunks that correspond to scent glands. Hollowed bark shaped into breath chambers. Even little nests designed to direct airflow in ways that make communication easier. They're building whisper tools. No bones, no flutes. Just simple biology guided by need. You step back, careful not to disturb them. This is their rehearsal. They're still figuring it out, still learning how to be quiet in the right ways. But there's an energy here you haven't felt in the larger breathers. These creatures are hungry for rhythm. They don't just copy, they refine, and they do it in the dark. Where the old giants don't look, where sound used to die. You walk away slowly, not wanting to spook the moment. In your chest, your breath keeps its rhythm. You're part of both worlds now, the age of whispering giants, and the rise of noisy things learning to be quiet. The cave finds you more than you find it. Hidden behind a curtain of dry moss and lichen, it yawns open near the base of a cliff where roots crawl like fingers searching for water. You push aside the curtain step into the cool, still dark and breathe in immediately sensing it. The air hums. Not loudly, not rhythmically, just enough to raise the fine hairs on your arm. It's not a ghost, not a predator. It's history. Old air. Remembering. You move deeper. The ground crunches underfoot, not with bones, but with mineralized leaves. Fossils of ferns and fronds flattened under the weight of breathless centuries. The walls glisten slightly with condensation, and the air grows denser with each step. And then you see them. The bones, dozens of snouts, fossilized skulls of long-gone whisper-breathers are embedded in the stone. Some whole, some shattered, all facing the same direction like a choir in frozen procession. And they aren't just bones. They're instruments. The wind moves through the cave slow, patient, uncertain, and as it brushes past the hollow skulls, it sings. Not in melody, but in murmur. One exhales a reedy hiss almost insect-like. Another gives off a low droning thrum. A third, barely audible, makes a sound like someone breathing just behind your ear. You freeze, because it doesn't feel random. It feels orchestrated. Historians still debate whether whisper breathers returned to caves to die, or whether these locations were gathering places to leave breath signals behind etched in stone and skull. Some argue the positioning is natural. Others say it was deliberate. But tonight, listening to wind move through nasal bone, you have no doubt this cave is an archive. You step further inside and breathe softly through your own nose. The nearest fossil catches it. The wind shifts. The hum changes. You've just added a note, a small one, but yours. The idea terrifies you and thrills you. You aren't just listening to the past now. You're inside it. One skull stands out from the rest. Enormous. Cracked but mostly whole. Its crest twists like a spiral staircase layered with sediment. You approach it slowly, your own breath caught halfway between reverence and fear. The wind dies for a moment, and then returns stronger this time. A gust. It pushes through the crest. The note it plays is deep, long, vibrating. A whale song in bone. It shudders the cave. And then, around you, the others reply one by one like old voices stirring from stone. For a few long seconds, you stand in the center of a breath symphony. A cathedral of whispers. No words, no translation, just shape and air. And it's not for you. It never was. This was for them. The dying, the lost. The ones who chose to speak only through nostrils because the world had taught them that survival meant stillness, restraint, precision. This was their legacy, not written in blood. Written in how not to be heard. Fun fact, in certain caves in France, prehistoric humans painted animals only in places where the echo matched the creature's call. As if the art wasn't complete until the cave itself replied. This is the same thing. A conversation between wind and fossil, between breath and bone. You kneel and listen to the final note. It fades slowly, and for a moment you imagine what will come after. Mammals with bigger lungs, throats instead of crests, language instead of signal, and eventually noise. So much noise. Cities, sirens, arguments. But here, it's quiet again. You let out one breath, soft, warm, and low. It travels down the cave, and does not return. Not yet. Because this cave, this cathedral, still holds its own rhythm. And it's not done humming. The whisperers didn't roar. They didn't conquer. They breathed. They learned that the jungle remembers the loud ones, but only long enough to bury them. And in their place, it keeps the ones who spoke in mist and rhythm, who whispered warnings, who shaped wind into language. You walked with them. You listened as air turned to signal, as silence became culture, and as even mammals learned to borrow what was never meant for them. You watched a trumpet beast die trying to summon the past. You saw birds tune into ghosts. You stood in a cave of singing skulls. And through it all, you learned that survival didn't come from strength but from restraint. Maybe that's what this whole journey has been about. Not discovering how they whispered, but learning why they chose not to scream. So tonight, as you turn off your screen as the fan hums quietly in your room, take a moment to breathe softer. Just once. For them.